if you can cook, you can homebrew. I mean,
Or if you can't cook, you can homebrew.
right. I mean, it's experimentation. Just the worst thing about that will happen, that I've heard can happen, is like the bottles exploding from overcarbonation. But that's the worst of it.
Yeah, I've
I mean,
that happen. It's a little surprising.
It's a surprising, like, you know.
When it happens in the middle of the night, particularly, it can be a little disconcerting. It wasn't actually, it wasn't that the cap came off, it was that the neck.
Right, just
broke.
Yeah.
That's a surprisingly loud noise when it's inside a closet.
Right. And the most recent thing I've brewed is a cider, because we have an apple tree and just, hey, we got all this juice. Why not?
See, I've done cider more often than not. And that's pretty easy, because all you do is you take the apple juice, throw it in there, just throw some brewer's yeast into the bucket, leave it for a month, and you're fine. I had a guy who's standing in the room, though, make a batch of, what do you call it, move-in melon that tasted like paint nail polish remover. It was horrid. I mean, I've had a lot of beers in my life, and this is the worst.
Yeah. You're welcome. You got me in on this. The problem with it is that the boil called for adding cantaloupe to it during the boil, and then you pitch it after, to get rid of it after that. My roommate and I decided to go ahead and keep it in during the resting period. The problem is that when cantaloupe gets overly ripe, it produces, what is it? It wasn't aspartame, it was acetone. So after the 2 weeks, I will say the carbonation was there, the body was there, it had full lacing, all the characteristics of the beer were there, including the flavor, which was nail polish.
Were you aiming for like a sour?
No,
It was supposed to be
It was going to be a melon IPA, nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a simple recipe, and just that you got to remember that those simple things that you screw up will work forever. I did my most recent one I've been trying to do is a double IPA cider. So you get a little bit of bitterness and all that, and I added a little too much because I was trying to up the bitter on it. So I added the rind of grapefruit into it, and the entire thing came out like just bitter grapefruit, like you got stood up on prom bitter. Not sweet at all. It was pretty bad. We barely, so I let it sit for a while, and it sat so long until I accidentally left the lid off, and it spread all over Adam's kitchen floor. And that's the other thing I will say, that if you can get if you have a small kitchen or anything like that, only thing better is somebody else's kitchen. That is the greatest place to homebrew. If you can have a neighbor like 3 houses down, that way you don't have to deal with the closet or the mess or anything else. It's the greatest place to homebrew.
Yeah, my biggest problem lately is the fact that there's a great brewery on my way to and from work. So, and like I told these guys, I've been telling people, like, when they opened, I want a kegerator from them, and I just fill it with their beer. So it's like I have no incentive to make beer, but I still do because I like to do it. You know, I mean, and that's the thing, is you can make any beer you want if you can think up the idea. Go for it. I mean, I prefer less bitter beers. John prefers quadruples and crazy stuff, but
tasty beers
out there too. Yeah, I know that there's a ton of brewers, and if you talk, I mean, like if you get a hold of even Sam Caligoni, the Dogfish Head, he will sit down and talk beer with you and all of that. I've had conversations with one of the bigger breweries in Florida. Came into the restaurant doing a beer thing like that, and I was talking to him about how to make my double IPA cider not prom bitter. And he's like, all right, here's a couple of facts that you need to worry about and stuff like that. And they're more than willing, if you have any homebrewing conversations, find your local brewery that's got beer that you like, walk in, and you will talk to everybody behind the bar, because all of them have some stupid story.
Yeah, they got into it because they're homebrewers usually. You know?
Yeah.
So, hi, I'm John.
Hi, John.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, didn't tell you my last name. So similarly to Joe, I did some homebrewing in like 97, 98, and kind of fell out of it. I wasn't that into cooking at the time. And
Biology though, man. Biochem.
yeah, I did my graduate thesis on Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is baker's yeast, which is also brewer's yeast. But the thing that I kind of fell out of doing it was I didn't really have the time to invest in getting good enough at it. So the problem was I could make beer. It was all right, but I costed it out at one point. And it was like,
it's like
this is not really any cheaper than just buying beer, and it's a whole hell of a lot more work, and I wasn't enjoying it. But I have been thinking about getting back into it because I've been cooking more. And one of the appealing things is that, like Augie said, it is more like cooking as opposed to baking, right? I hate to bake because baking is fiddly and you have to get everything like exactly right or it doesn't work. Whereas with cooking, you can just be like, that looks like it needs some more oregano. So brewing is a little bit more like that. Yeah.
Well, also, like say, and like versus say winemaking, the cycles are so much shorter.
The cycles are a lot shorter. And I mean, the one other thing I wanted to say was if you're considering getting into this, try to do something darker first because it's a lot easier to hide your mistakes in that. Don't go out and try to make like an American adjunct lager.
From a lot of the brew shops around here, they say use those Mr. Beers because they're only like 2 gallons, and you can talk to like the brew shops and all that. They have specialty stuff. Like another one that we have in Sanford has specialty kits just for the Mr. Beers, so you can just throw out the packets that come with it because nobody wants to make that horrible pale ale. But you can get like the fresh hops, and a lot of the bigger breweries, they do that one first. They'll do like 2 gallons because it's a lot easier to pawn it off on your friends, 2 gallons worth of beer, than 5 gallons worth of beer, of crap beer.
And Brooklyn Brew Shop does the kits, and so even once you buy that initial one, oh thanks. And so even with Brooklyn Brew Shop, once you buy that initial kit with the carboy, I can never remember what that word is. I know. With the carboy, with the carboy, you can get like sort of refill kits, and it's nice because then you can try out different styles of beer without having to make the investment of going to your beer shop, like following a recipe and getting all the grains. There are a couple things. I guess we haven't really talked much about like the beer making process.
I was just going to actually say something about that just real quick.
Yes, please. Like some
And
of
then
the
you
terms.
can talk about it.
No, yeah, the terms that we're using and some of that stuff.
Just again, as somebody who has had microbiology sort of training, don't do the get some apple cider and chuck yeast in it thing because you're going to grow something that will make you very unhappy. You have a decent chance of growing something that's going to make you very unhappy, and you're going to spend a lot of time in a small room in your house. So it is important when you're doing this to be aware that you need to be
Sanitary, but you don't have to.
sanitary. Well, the people that I've seen that homebrew seriously, and I don't remember what it's called. There's a solution that's basically a dilute bleach solution.
sulfate?
Yeah, where you just basically are just spraying that constantly on everything. Yes, Mr. Strauss.
I don't really homebrew, but in the late 90s, my wife was part of a microbrewery startup. She was one of the brewers there. Like many startups, it went bust when one of the partners and founders died of work. Yeah. Her description of it is basically if only go into brewing if you're really, really keen on cleaning.
Yes.
Yes. That's actually that's part of the thing
Rubbing
too.
brushes and sodium.
That's beer in general. Like, I mean, most of my job, I use on like bartending now 3 days a week. 90% of it, and Steph can attain to this. 90% of your job is cleaning something, polishing a glass, and then maybe taking an order from somebody because all you're gonna have to do is just re-clean that thing glass.
So with brewing, it is like the sterilization is very important. Or sanitation. I apologize. Brooklyn Brew Shop also has like little packets of a sanitizer, and so what we usually do is we make the solution, and then you just dip your equipment in it. Yeah.
Anything, put it back. I mean, if you have any qualms about it being unsterile, put it.
Well, it's not. It's real. Like you can, like I said, remember that you're going to be introducing stuff into it that's going to take over. You just want to try to avoid having the unsavory stuff be able to live and exist in that environment as well. So you don't have to be like hospital clean.
Let's say you're trying to
Yeah.
for the
If you're trying to
yeast to have the best chance to just push out everything else.
So like the basic and I was trying to find online if Brooklyn Brewery or Brooklyn Brew Shop, they have a nice little picture guide, and they have a little tutorial on their website, a little video that walks you through the basics of what you do when you're making beer. But essentially, and I might be skipping a step here, but essentially you get your grains, which is the flavor of your beer, and that's going to be your food, and I believe you bring that to a certain temperature, and it's really important at that stage, like you have it I think for like an hour.
It depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, it depends on the beer you're making.
That's the whole. I mean, it's the easier, step easier, right? With the syrups.
Yeah.
I mean, that's most people when they start home brewing, they start with the malt syrup. So it's basically instead of you taking the malt and extracting all the sugar out of it, they do that for you, and then they concentrate it because it's stupid to ship water. So you get this malt syrup with different malt characteristics, and you can throw in hops, but you can also amp it up by putting grains and stuff. If you don't want to do the all grain brewing, which is kind of like the pinnacle of home.
So you're great. So yeah, if you are doing grain, that stage is called the mash. I believe that's right. Yeah, it's called the mash. You maintain it at a certain temperature. If you get it too hot, you'll cook the grain, and so the yeast won't. Or cook the enzymes.
Chewing up the
and so
sugar.
So then the yeast won't be able to. There won't be anything left. Yeah. Now if you have it too cold, then you don't release. Yeah. The other thing to note is that when you have grain for your mash, typically you go to a brew shop or online, and you'll need to crack the grain in order to.
Well, most any brew shop will do it.
Yeah.
You don't have your own mill.
Yeah, but that's just something to be aware of. There is a little bit of process with processing the grain, but essentially you're doing this pre-step. And so when we talk about the mash, how are we doing on time?
It's 10 till.
Okay. All right.
9 till.
Okay. Yeah. So so that's your mash stage, and then when you add, and then when do you add the hops? It varies.
Well, the mash, then you rinse the sugars out. It's called
right.
Water, and then you have what's called the wort.
So the wort, so you drain. So after you do this mash in this big pot, you strain it, and that's where I was saying, like, we just had this tiny little strainer for our kitchen, So you really want to get something larger. Amazon has some good stuff, brewery supplies do, but you want a bit of something larger, and like some kind of a large plastic bucket or something you can strain into. So then you've got basically your beer water, your pre-beer.
Yeah, pre-beer.
The wort.
And then you boil it. And then
in the yeast.
No.
Not yet.
Put the hops in.
And then you add the hops.
The acids from the alpha acids from the hops.
Yeah.
Then you cool it down, and then you dump it into the carboy. Then you
pitch the yeast. So for cooling, this is kind of neat. We picked up, a lot of times they'll tell you to put it in a sink full of ice. We actually picked up this cool copper tube that hooks into the sink. So you screw it into the sink, and then you run cold water, and it's a coil that you'd. Yeah.
That's what I need, because I don't do in the winter because I don't have a chiller.
Right.
So I got to.
And you can get them, and ours is pretty small, and it actually fits into a large stock pot. So even for smaller, like 1 or 2 gallon brews, you can find stuff that's small enough. Just check the measurements on everything to make sure that it's going to fit. But that's pretty much it.
Also, another gadget is really useful to have if you're going to do this. You see the big coffee urns out there, the electrically heated variety, preferably ones with a thermostat so you can set the temperature. Those are indispensable, and you can often find at a Goodwill shop or similar. For a song.
Yeah, we use a candy thermometer, but it's not as automated, so we're constantly having to turn it off and turn it back on. And then finally, I also make wine, and I find wine is actually a lot easier to make than beer.
Right.
To make wine, you don't heat anything.
Yeah, just juice, yeast.
You get I get a bag, like a mesh bag, and fill it with fruit, and then you extract the juice from it. In a bucket, and then you pretty much just pitch the yeast, and then I usually follow recipes, so you put different types of tablets in it. You do like a sterilization to kill any wild yeast that might be in it. And then you just let it sit. I made some blackberry wine in December. It was in December. And so it's still sitting. It's going to sit for a year. That's the only thing that is a disadvantage of wine or mead making, is it's a similar process. You just don't use heat, and it's got to age. It's a more slow-acting yeast. So cider and beer are definitely great for faster. Immediate
consumption.
Yeah,
yes.
Instant gratification.
Yes, instant gratification.
But like I say, you can ferment anything.
Yes.
Because like moonshine, you can do whatever you want. If you're crazy enough, why not?
Subject to the laws of whatever jurisdiction you happen to be in.
Another thing that you can do if you make wine.
No, because moonshine is just fermented sugar, then they distill it. That's what moonshine really is.
Yeah, home distilling is.
That's the best.
The distilling part might be illegal depending on where you are. But if you are making your own wine and say the wine doesn't come out too good, that is always an option of what to do with it. I haven't tried it with beer. Can you distill beer?
You can distill beer.
I did this accidentally once. It's called freeze distillation.
You can do
Because like icebox is basically take a beer, freeze it,
throw away the water,
and throw away the ice. Well, but I mean,
a lot of breweries.
you can do it up to. I mean,
Actually,
it's,
in Edinburgh, Brewdog actually made the world's strongest beer, and that's how they did it. When they made Tactical Nuclear Penguin, they took the ice off of it and they ice brewed it, and then when they had to beat the Krauts again for Sink the Bismarck, they took just more of the ice out, and that's actually how they made End of History. Even it's basically it's distilled,
it's a
but it's in a
safer
brewing
distillation
system,
because
so
you don't
they
have-
scapegoated.
They claim that it's beer solely because HM customs and excise rules say that to be distilled, it has to be distilled using a still.
Right.
They really worked on that definition of distilled.
But no, I mean,
That's why beer.
it's a legitimate.
It's-
anything that separates the two.
It's but it's a legitimate. It's
Depends on
no,
the-
it's a
yeah.
legitimate traditional beer style.
Yeah,
I mean,
icebox
icebox or.
And there are even there are styles of beer where it's open fermented, where instead of pitching the yeast, you just set it outside. and
Whatever happens,
Yeah.
happens.
have fun.
And that's your classic Belgian.
That's your
Those are
Belgic,
my
your
favorites.
Belgian,
I
Belgian
haven't tried
lambics,
the
your
sourdough
gooses.
beer. Yeah, I haven't
Those are
tried
fun.
making
Those are
those.
just you get like that's what I do
Yeah.
with my ciders because it gets this George Clinton amounts of funk in it. It's awesome. So you get these like weird flavors that you have no idea where they came from. And that's why I just pitch in the yeast, get it a start, and then have fun.
The other thing to mention, the major different styles of yeast, you've got the top fermenting versus bottom fermenting.
Right.
There are
Lager
lagers-
yeast
I mean,
versus
lager
ale
needs-
yeast.
Well, the problem with lagers are you need a cold, near freezing place to hang them out because that's what lagering does. Because the yeast, like I said, like Charlie said, is like the bottom fermenting yeast, the Carlos Burgensis.
That's right.
I know my shit. They do it at a lower temperature, and
Yeah.
you just gotta let them. And then they just
done,
chew through things for like weeks on end. So
So we should probably wind it up. It's 4 till.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody
Adam,
has questions, you can
Adam's-
find any
yeah,
of us.
just
And-
do
We'll
it.
be in the bar, most likely. Yes, Mr. Moore.
Single word answer question. Is this an expensive hobby?
No,
Doesn't have to be.
Can be.
Addicting.
no, it's
Yes and no.
I mean, it depends. Like Augie's saying, you can do it with common kitchen equipment, but I also have a friend, the guy who waited on us right at the table, Anthony. Anthony's got a brewing setup where he's got 3 pony kegs soldered onto a metal frame with one of them where he can lift it up to a different level. So when he's draining the mash, there's no like colander. It's going through a filter and a tube out the bottom,
Yep.
and it's got it like the integrated propane torch. It's 3 half pony kegs on a metal frame with a propane tank bolted onto it
Well, that's not even that
for the
sophisticated.
boil.
Like there's the recirculating fusion mass system, which like they have pumps that just
Yeah.
move all the liquids everywhere. And it's
Or-
like nuts.
Start? Yes.
$40.
To start.
No, you can buy a Mr. Beer kit for $20.
Or-
and
Right.
beer.
Or Brooklyn,
To start,
Brooklyn Brew
it's
Shop.
not that expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, but Brooklyn Brew Shop, it's $40, and maybe you go to Goodwill and buy a really big stock pot. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, Reba.
Today, like for example, once you're experienced and everything, you want to make a batch of, I know what McDonald's size batch is. How much does it actually cost you personally?
or if you buy a kit from Brooklyn Brew Shop to make a 1-gallon kit, or to make a 1-gallon amount of beer, it costs $25 for that kit.
And then what's the refill for that? Like if you just
The
No,
refill?
that's ingredients and everything.
So if you were
like
gonna
that.
buy
They
ingredients to
everything
make another
you want. Like,
batch,
Mr. Beer kits
but
are
use the
$40 and
equipment.
they'll
That's
make
what
you
it is.
Oh, it's 25
half
bucks.
Yeah, the
okay.
refill kit
So-
is $25.
It's, I mean, it's going to be
There's a capital
Cheaper?
cost. Yeah.
to go out and buy a beer if you just want to sit and drink a beer.
It depends, but it
But
depends on
if
what.
you want to get your beer,
I was gonna say, if it depends on what kind of beer you like. I mean, if you like really good premium beer, like you pay a lot of money, you know,
Right.
for, like, you know, so brewing your own is a good, and if you drink it in any quantity.
Well, but it's also like John and I, we make our own broth and stock.
Yeah.
The price of the kits you're discussing here are just jaw-dropping to me. In the UK, brew kits to make your own beer, cheap and nasty ones you can get for about £3 or £4 to make a gallon, ranging up to maybe £10. But raw ingredients are a lot cheaper. Doing it in 5-gallon batches, you should be looking at under 50 cents per pint.
Sure.
Oh,
yeah.
another thing, if you have a yard and you have a garden and you have space, you can grow hops really, really easily.
every state
I got
in
hops.
the U.S.
Yeah.
except for one can grow hops.
Well, that depends how well they grow too. I mean,
The one you're in.
the one you're in.
The one you're in.
You can't. I bet you
Hops
probably
grow up.
can't grow hops in Alaska very well.
I'm sure there's a
Lower
way.
parts of it during
I'm
the summer
confident
months.
that there's a way that you can grow
Month.
hops.
I'll say hops are cool because the things grow like they're weeds. I mean, they grow like
Yeah.
20, 30 feet,
Yeah,
and then they'll grow like a foot in a week. It seems like they grow a foot in a day. You can watch them, but, you know.
Yeah.
I will add one thing, I don't know if you guys talked about it, but of course there are tons of forums that are online, all sorts of advanced, but honestly, your biggest, if you have